The most disturbing chapters, schools would have to separate worthwhile breeders from those slated for termination. Mueller would win the Nobel Prize, more power to the state, Rockefeller, Carnegie, Harvard, Stanford, the Education Trust, Prussian model in the United States, unquestionably served the state. Horace Mann was deeply impressed. Destroy the family unit. It was working exactly as it was intended. State is parent. I do not believe that. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Welcome to the Foundations of Learning podcast. I hope to inspire you to actively participate in your child's learning journey, fostering a love for knowledge and nurturing the skills necessary for success in a rapidly changing world. As an American citizen and American educator, I have been very proud of our commitment in America to education. However, my pride took a very big hit when I delved into Chapter 2 of the Underground History of American Education by John Taylor Gatto. It honestly seemed like it was not real. And then I looked at the thousands of resources that he had and the quotes he had from the people that founded our education system and compulsory schooling and all of this stuff. And I was like, okay, all right, this is real. So if you haven't read it, please do. But in this video, I'm going to share my opinion on Chapter 2. We're going to talk about the roots of public education in the United States as detailed by Gatto. This chapter was probably one of the most disturbing chapters that I read in the book. I remember telling my husband over and over again, like, you have to read this paragraph. You have to read this paragraph. Oh my gosh, did you know? It was kind of disgusting, also eye-opening. And I definitely at that point in time was like, ignorance is bliss. It is not bliss. Because we have to understand the way that our systems work. Because if we don't understand the way our systems work, they can take advantage of us. Our system isn't supporting these kids. They're not supporting the parents. And teachers, which I think is so funny, are getting upset that parents get to tell them what to do with their children. And I'm like, hold on, but it's their kids. It's not your kids. Like, it's this weird view we have in our society now, like state is parent. I do not believe that. I do not believe that state is parent. You ultimately are parent. You should have say. You should be able to raise your child in whatever way you see fit. It is not the state's duty to tell you how to do that. So it's really funny. Like, why are they so maddened by these supportive families? Like, when I had a supportive family, I was like, hallelujah, like, love you guys. And so I just think it's very funny that they're like, they're in my business. And I'm like, well, it is their business. It's their kid. Anywho, so after reading this chapter, I finally felt like I wasn't crazy, because for the longest time I was like, I'm the crazy person. It's me. I'm crazy. But when you go through the history of our education system and how it was set up, why it was set up, it makes so much sense. You're like, I'm not crazy. What Gatto says, or what he states based on the research he did, the system was set up to destroy the family unit, creativity, open debates, and individuals. It was working exactly as it was intended to dumb down society and create obedient workers who find joy in material things to keep the wheel turning. He goes in to talk about the Prussian Connection. In the early 19th century, Horace Mann, a prominent educator, visited Prussia and was deeply impressed by their state-controlled education system. Mann, along with other influential figures of his time, advocated for the adoption of the Prussian model in the United States. If you want to learn more about Horace Mann, I did a podcast. So if you want to go check that out, I did do a podcast about our reading wars, and he has a lot to do with it. So what makes this connection particularly disturbing in the Prussian model's primary purpose? So the reason it's so disturbing is because their primary purpose of their education system was to produce obedient and disciplined citizens who would unquestionably serve the state. It goes totally against what we were founded on, but it really did contrast the American ideals of individualism, critical thinking, and personal liberty. Instead of nurturing the free-thinking individual, our public education system was initially designed to create a workforce that could be easily controlled and manipulated. This was all happening during the industrial age. So everyone in the connection to our education system was not shy in stating this exact plan. Like, they just came out and said it. In a speech given by Woodrow Wilson before World War I, he actually states, "We want one class to have a liberal education, And we want another class, a very much larger class of necessity, to forego the privilege of a liberal education and fit themselves to perform specific, difficult manual tasks. I get that we need these different jobs, but what I don't believe is that it's the government's choice to make on what class is he saying? Like, who gets to have the liberal education and who has to do the manual tasks? Like, it's, you can kind of see in his wording that it sounds like they are going to be telling us which of these people are going to be doing such tasks. So Gatto states by 1917, the major administrative jobs in American schooling were under the control of a group referred to in the press of the day as the Education Trust. The first meeting of this trust included representatives of Rockefeller, Carnegie, Harvard, Stanford, the University of Chicago, and the National Education Association. Hello, NEA. The chief end, wrote Benjamin Kidd, the British evolutionist, in 1918 was to impose on the young the ideal of subordination. My impression is that students are to learn to think of themselves as mere employees competing for the favor of their management. As a teacher, you have 20 or more kids in a classroom that, in a sense, are thought to think of themselves as a community of learners that are competing for the favor of the teacher. I say this because as a teacher, you are taught in your university classes so many classroom management strategies that are a baseline of, if everyone follows my rules, then you're rewarded. These rules will differ from district to district, from teacher to teacher, but one common thread, I would assume, is that you must wait to be called on. It's a big one, right? You have to raise your hand to speak, which in a sense I do get. When you have 20 or more kids in your class and you have 20 of them blurting at you, it's like complete disaster. You have to have a system of when they speak, because then it's just crazy. You can only speak about the topics that I have provided. That one's kind of an unsaid one. And you must ask permission for almost everything. Ask permission to go to the bathroom, to get a drink, to get a new pencil, to get a whatever. You have to ask permission. Like I said, I understand the basis of these rules, because if you don't have them, it can create chaos. Like, you have to essentially control the chaos is what you're doing as the teacher. And that is most of your job. Most of your job is controlling the chaos and a lot of paperwork, a lot of planning, and then a little bit of teaching. That's what teaching is, if I'm being honest. Another thing that the education system does is it teaches them how to spend 8 hours a day sitting at a desk, shifting between tasks, listening to a superior, eating at a certain time, in a certain amount of time, and how to get along with others that they didn't necessarily choose to be around. What does that sound like to you? To me, it sounds like a 9-to-5 job. That is really what we're teaching the kids. This is how you work. Now, is that a skill that you need to know? Like, do you need to know how to do those things to be a good employee? I mean, you need to know how to complete a task and do it well. You need to know how or when to listen to authority, but also when to question. I had no problem in my classroom when a child would ask me, like, why? Like, if I had a rule, I always told them why. I never just said, this is because I said so. No, we always discussed why. And if you actually involve them in that questioning of why, they're like, oh, okay, well, that's fine, whatever, right? But they could question me, or they could tell me when they thought I was wrong. And we would have a discussion about it. And I was teaching first graders, and they would tell me sometimes that I am wrong. And some of my kids, they were so smart. They had so many different, things that they knew that I was like, oh, that's super cool. Let's Google it. Or if they ask me a question, whatever. So they could question me. And I think it's important that we have those abilities, because we have to be able to question authority. I'm going to go into the next section of his book, which is a disheartening shift in values. This is when he kind of talks about the transition from the role of the parent and the role of the state. So his exploration of the early roots of American public education reveals a troubling shift in our values. So while education was once considered as a private, family-centered endeavor, it was gradually co-opted by the state. This transition meant that parents and communities had less control over what their children learned and how they were educated. And then came the common school movement. So this was spearheaded by Mann, so Horace Mann, who we talked about, and his allies. So the focus shifted from educating citizens who could think critically and contribute to society to creating a uniform, obedient workforce. Now, I do kind of disagree with him on that aspect of things. I actually have read the Common School Journal from 1852. For Mann, it wasn't really about creating an obedient workforce. For him, it was like, how do we Americanize these savages, right? Like he was talking about like literally like he actually thought what we did for the Native Americans was just great. We should do it for the Irish and we should do it for these people, and that we should, teach these values because that's what it is to be an American, and we need to make sure that they act in a certain way and speak in a certain way and whatever. Like that really was what he thought, and he is considered the father of our American education system. So just think about that for a second. The shift in values robbed parents of their autonomy and teachers of their creative freedom. So as the shift was happening in the late 1800s to early 1900s, parents of that time were actually kind of outraged. Schoolhouses were being burnt to the ground, children were escaping from schools, and this posed a real problem to the utopian view of those who were creating this new system. They did not like it. It wasn't going as they were planning it. And this is when they started thinking about the idea of compulsory schooling, and Mann was a huge advocate. He truly believed you should, by law, have to send your kid to these schools. And so it was like this new role of compulsion. So as he starts to discuss, he starts to say that because we didn't want to send our kids there. So then they were like, all right, well, we're just going to force them then. If they're not going to do it on their own, we're just going to force them. If they think that this isn't okay, that doesn't matter. We're going to force them to do it anyway. So then they have the heavy-handed approach that reinforced the idea that education was not about nurturing a child's curiosity or individual growth, but about molding them to fit the state's needs. It's not about what you want. It's about what the state needs. And right now you're being a pest, you're being a savage, you're being a whatever, and we need you to just comply. If you don't think that this still happens today, it does. Like, go look at the NEA and the things that they have said in the last year. Just go look at their page and you will know what the education system stands for. But if you are unhappy with public schools, just know you have a choice. You can make the choice of what road you go down and where you send your kid to school. And I know I'm harping a lot on the public education system, but it's so important to know the history of it. And it's so funny because people will be like, why didn't I learn about finances or taxes or how to do X, Y, and Z? The school system didn't want you to know about those things because it actually doesn't help them. It helps you. Now we're starting to see in today's age a shift happening again, where there's a shift for more power to the state and less to the families. And you see parents like being kicked out of school board meetings merely because they don't like what's being taught. I get it as a parent that like maybe that is the route you have to take, is send your kid to public school, but also you have a choice. You don't have to. If you don't like what's being taught, take the education of your child into your hands. You can do it. You really don't need a fancy degree. I promise you, I got a fancy degree and it did not help me very much. I had to do my own research and figure out what the heck worked best because they didn't teach me best practices. You can do it. You really can. And it is the harder road. The harder road is going to be to take your child's education into your own hands. The easier road, send them to the public education system and let them handle it. With each one, you have your pros and you have your cons, so you have to decide. In my opinion, school should be a place where we learn to read, write, comprehend text at high levels, learn to do arithmetic, critically think, problem solve, discuss, participate in internships, help in communities, and just a place where creativity, entrepreneurial spirit, and all of that lives. Early Americans tried to fight against this compulsion of schooling, but they failed. So my question is, like, did we give up because of some promise of safety that resulted in the loss of our liberty? Like, Benjamin Franklin has actually said, he's quoted saying, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." Like, how did that happen? Like, I think back and I'm like, how did we as Americans just like give up and allow for this to happen? If we're like burning down schoolhouses, is it because we were just jailing our own citizens and like, nope, sorry, go to jail because you won't send your kid to school? Like, have we lost our liberty and the school board and state know this? I think that they have given us a false feeling of control. And now that parents are pushing back, we're actually seeing that we never really had control. Never. And I believe that more people in our country agree that the school system has taken too much power into their hands. And it is not our job as educators to push our values and beliefs onto the children in our classroom. One thing I find so comical is that is like when you are signing a contract with a district, the number one thing it says is like, you cannot push your own values and beliefs on these children. But there are still people out there who think that the school system needs to teach you everything, right? Like like I had said, there's so many memes that like, I wish the school system would have taught me how to do taxes, change a tire, buy a house. Like, how does our financial system work? How do I invest? If you were to read this entire book, you would not want to be taught by the government how to do your taxes. Are they going to tell you how to keep more of your hard-earned money you made? Or are they going to teach you how to pay them more money? So there are things in life that I do think that it just needs to be taught by the parent. You have so many resources at your fingertips. We live in the day and age of internet. You can learn whatever the heck you want when you want. You just have to put in the actual energy to do so. Educate yourself. That is what education should be. And the education system does not teach you how to educate yourself. It teaches you how to be told stuff, how to remember it, how to test on it. Is this why they don't fear us? Because they know that we have put in so much trust in them to teach you everything that they think you should know? I just think education and learning shouldn't be forced on a person. Like I had said, this is something you have to do for yourself to better yourself, to learn a skill based on what you find interesting and that you are good at. You are born with curiosity. And I feel like the school system beats that out of our kids, because you will notice that like you go to a kindergarten class, they ask a bunch of questions. You go to a 12th grade class and they might not be asking that many questions. They're there and they're sitting there and they're like, what do you want me to learn? What do you want me to do? How can I get an A? They are not there out of their own will and curiosity. Why does the state believe that they know what is best for you and they can tell you how they will raise your child? Have your answer. In 1922, Walter Lippmann demanded severe restrictions on public debate. In light of the enormous number of feeble-minded Americans, to him, democracy was insane. I suspect that the school boards, NEA, and the state, etc., would agree with him. You have no say, and these school board meetings you attend are merely to give you the illusion that they care about what you think. Meanwhile, at the project offices of an important employer of experts, the Rockefeller Foundation, which is who created the Board of Education, friends were hearing from Max Mason, its president, that a comprehensive national program was underway to allow, in Manson's words, the control of human behavior. This dazzling ambition was announced on April 11, 1933. Schooling figured prominently in the design. Rockefeller had been inspired by the work of Eastern Europe scientist Hermann Mueller to invest heavily in genetics. Mueller had used X-rays to override genetic law, inducing mutations in fruit flies. This seemed to open the door to the scientific control of life itself. Mueller preached that planned breeding would bring mankind to paradise faster than God. His proposal received enthusiastic endorsement from the greatest scientists of the day, as well as from powerful economic interests. Mueller would win the Nobel Prize, reduce his proposal to a 1,500-word Genesis manifesto, and watch with satisfaction as 22 distinguished American and British biologists of the day signed it. The state must prepare to consciously guide human sexual selection, said Mueller. Schools would have to separate worthwhile breeders from those slated for termination. Just a few months before this report was released, an executive director of the National Education Association announced that his organization expected to accomplish by education what dictators in Europe are seeking to do by compulsion and force. Yep, you heard that right. In the section titled Bionomics, Gatto states, there was a facade behind which this was happening was a new enlightenment, scientific scholarship in league with German research values brought to America in the last half of the 19th century. Modern German tradition always assigned universities the primary task of directly serving industry and the political state, but that was a radical contradiction of American tradition to serve the individual and the family. The University of Indiana went down a dark road that is hard to comprehend. By 1900, there was a special discipline that existed only for their elite students. So I want you to think back to, I think it was Woodrow Wilson that said that There were certain people that got to have like a great education and certain people that were just going to be the manual laborers. This was called bionomics. People were invited by college president David Starr Jordan. He was who taught and created the course. So you might be asking, what the heck is bionomics? It is the why and how of producing a new evolutionary ruling class. It is reminiscent of kings, dukes, and princes. In this new scientific era, the ruling class were those managers trained in the goals and procedures of new systems. Jordan did so well that he was invited to Stanford and became the first president of Stanford University. He was president there for 30 years. When he finally left Indiana, he elected Elwood P. Cubberley to become Dean of Teacher Education at Stanford. Cubberley wrote The History of American Schooling, which became the standard of the school business for the next 50 years. Did the abstract and rather arcane discipline of bionomics have any effect on real life? Well, consider this. The first formal legislation making forced sterilization a legal act on planet Earth was passed, not in Germany or Japan, but in the American state of Indiana, a law which became official in the famous 1927 Supreme Court test case Buck v. Bell. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the majority opinion allowing 17-year-old Carrie Buck to be sterilized against her will to prevent her degenerate offspring. In Holmes' words, from being born 20 years after the momentous decision in the trial of German doctors, Nazi physicians testified that their precedents were American aimed at combating racial degeneracy. The German name for forced sterilization was the Indiana procedure. There are some dark things in our country, and I know that you probably know this, but when you think about it in relation to education, it makes me sick to my stomach. And whether or not you think I'm just a crazy person here on YouTube telling you these things, I urge you to just go do your own research. Seriously, go do your own research, go read his book, even if you go and look at the actual resources that he provides on where he's getting his information, go look at them. See if he's full of crap, or if he's not full of crap. That is for you to decide. But as an American citizen and as a teacher, I am just so deeply saddened and disturbed by the origins of our public education system. With the connection to the Prussian model, the shift in values, the use of compulsion, just all paint a disheartening picture of the early days of our education system and what it is today. Because if you think that it has changed, it has not. Obviously, certain things have evolved in the inception of what our education system was, but like the foundation of it has not really changed that much. And if you know who Horace Mann is, which I've read the Common School Journal, which is what he wrote, a lot of the stuff he says is the foundations of what our school system is. And it's not the best way to ensure that all students succeed. I don't believe that every school should be the same. I don't believe you should send your kid to school for 8 hours a day. It's not necessary. I believe that the community and the parents should have all of the say in the world as to what is being taught. We all have such differing beliefs and values, and that's what makes America so great, is that we are all so different. We are all individuals, and we have the right to practice the religion we want, to have the beliefs and the values that we want. We have freedom of speech. And our education system does not seem to even follow those values. And we want everyone to think in a certain way. They say that we're like inclusive and equity and blah, 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 and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, when you look at the NEAs, like what they believe that the teacher's main job is, it's not to invoke critical thinking and problem solving and teach kids to be proficient readers, writers, and mathematicians. That is not their main goal. I just want you to know, if you are a parent and you are not happy with the public education system, keep fighting or pull them out. Like, you have a choice. And teachers, if you feel like something is happening in your district or whatever that is not right, or you don't feel is right, stand up against it. I know it seems so scary to stand up for something, but if we don't have the ability to stand up for what we believe in, then what do we have? You need to stand up if there is something that you don't believe is right or is going in the right direction, and give them a different plan. These kids deserve it. Our future generation, they deserve it. They deserve the very best. And what we're providing right now is not the very best. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, at least tell me why. And if you're going to blow up my comments because you think I'm a crazy person, at least tell me why I'm a crazy person. I'd love to hear it. If you want to, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, but I hope you have future success in your learning and your own child's learning.